All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story, a short podcast from Light Reading exploring the biggest topics impacting the telecom industry, where we dive into one main story to tell you the latest news, why it matters, and what to expect next. I'm Nicole Ferraro, an editor at Light Reading, and I am here with the great Jeff Baumgartner, also an editor at Light Reading. Say hello to the people. You did great.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, that was nice.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to have you here, Jeff. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent news that Charter plans to buy Cox Communications for $34.5 billion, which you've written a couple of great stories about. We'll discuss what details we know so far, what the implications are for the companies and sectors involved, and what risks and opportunities are on the horizon. So just to get started, Jeff, tell us what we know so far, the details we know about this deal, the anticipated timeline, and why this combination makes sense according to Charter and Cox executives. I found it particularly notable in one of your stories that you mentioned that Cox has resisted being bought all these years. So clearly this makes sense for them at this point in time. So tell us what we know so far.
Yeah, well, definitely start off and say it was, it's like a good old fashioned merger of tier one cable operators and definitely a surprise. Because like you said, in all the M&A scuttlebutt, in recent years, it was to the point where Cox would publicly say, we're not for sale. They're this family owned operator. And, I think that, legacy means a lot to everybody there. It was such a surprise that it was Friday when it happened. I was supposed to have the day off, and I'm just glance at my phone at 6 in the morning, and it's like, oh no. Obviously, no one consulted me.
Unbelievable.
To see if it worked with my schedule. So so I had to get up and make heads and tails of it. So I would say it's really the first, kind of sizable M&A announcement in the U.S. cable world in quite a while. I had to go back, I had to think about it. And I'm like, well, you have to go back to when Charter bought Time Warner Cable and Bright House after Comcast failed to get them. And then Altice hopped the pond and came in and bought Suddenlink and Cablevision. So, so it was like a big move. And I think it makes a lot of sense if you're a believer that scale means almost everything.
Right.
These days, everything from the subscribers to, the kind of deals you can make for programming and supplies and name it, right? So if you look at what the combined company is going to be, it'll be, I think, 69.5 million locations passed based on the current network, and 37.6 million customers. And I think from the network reach, if you're looking at just that perspective, it'll be, I think, the largest U.S. cable operator, basically unseating Comcast. And when I was talking about the whole family orientation there, I remember a few years ago, Rogers went through up in Canada, another family-owned operator went through kind of a succession-like weird period with the kids all fighting. Anyway, not that doesn't happen at Cox, but what we do know is that the Cox name is going to live on as the parent company. So you kind of look back, and I obviously don't know how it all came together. Maybe we'll find out in the filings, but clearly it was important to somebody there that the company name moved forward. But the combined company will use the Spectrum branding that Charter did, and it'll continue to be led by Chris Winfrey, who's the current CEO of Charter. And you'd ask, why does it make sense? I think that Charter thinks there's some pretty good opportunity to extend their pricing and packaging with what they've done with the Spectrum packages and bring that to the Cox footprint and try to generate growth, particularly in the mobile side of it. And they talked about synergies, I think like 500 million So, I'm sure layoffs will be part of that, but for the duplicative jobs. But New Street, they thought that number was pretty conservative. And the timeline, they haven't announced anything specific, but New Street thinks they might be able to get it done by next June. So,
Okay.
which
Okay.
seems kind of quick. I mean, that's a year away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So, great background here, especially given that it was a surprise that you had to deal with on your day off. So let's talk a little bit about why it matters. You mentioned the New Street analysts, but what are analysts in general saying about the implications of this deal for both companies, for customers, for investors, and for the cable industry at large, or even mobile and streaming as well? And what is this combination going to mean for their network upgrade plans, expansion plans, and the mobile business? I think that's a pretty significant part of this, right?
Yeah. I think there's definitely some potential, a lot of potential on that mobile side. But
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, we're going to kind of get a better look, I think, at how Cox has been performing in recent years.
Right.
They've been kind of a black box of sorts. They went private like 20 years ago. Anything, they really haven't had to give you a whole lot of detail in terms of how good or how bad they've been performing. The industry's people I talk to say, well, they're dealing with all the same things that the other U.S. cable operators are dealing with. So broadband subscriber losses being one of them. So,
right.
So I think there's a lot of upside on the mobile end. Cox got back into the mobile game a couple of years ago, and I think they only have like 200,000 mobile lines. So if you look at the penetration of that, we're talking, just guesstimating here, 2.3%. If you were to say the average broadband customer gets 1.5 lines, some get 3, some get 1. So just a guess, but Charter's been in mobile much longer, very successful, the most successful U.S. cable operator that's in terms of mobile. They have like 10.4 million lines now. They've been pretty aggressive with bundles where you combine home broadband, and even video is becoming something that even Charter's suddenly more excited about, which is weird, because a lot of cable operators have been getting the hell out of that business. We'll get into that, but and they're maybe throwing in a mobile line for a year, but they've been pretty successful at turning those free lines into paid. So we'll see how that game plan can transition to the current Cox footprint. And then you asked about upgrades, network upgrades. Time's going to tell on that one because they've been going in similar but different directions. Cox has been ahead of Charter in terms of doing distributed access architecture, and they've been focused on mid splits, which has to do with the amount of spectrum that you're dedicating to the upstream. You start with like a low split. Now you basically double the amount of capacity you're dedicating to the upstream. So that helps. And then, the vendor stuff is in there. They picked Vecima for the virtual CMTS as they were looking at their 4.0, DOCSIS 4.0 plan. And then Charter, a lot different. They've been doing this multi-phase approach that includes high splits, which is even more capacity dedicated to the upstream, but they're just getting started with DAA and get into a virtual CMTS and eventually DOCSIS 4.0 to a portion of the footprint. And Harmonic is their announced virtual CMTS. So, it's like, okay, there's a little bit of a difference there. The other thing, this was something I was keeping an eye on. I'm like, thank God I didn't write a lot on it at the time because I would have looked kind of silly, not the first time, but there was a lot of chatter after Charter announced Vecima that Comcast was also pursuing Cox to do a syndication deal for broadband, like they had done with X1 and video, and along the lines of what Rogers in Canada is doing with Comcast. So obviously that's off the table.
Right.
So I was like, well, I think Comcast thought that'd be a good opportunity. Didn't work out. And I'm sure somebody somewhere knew that this deal was in the works and said, we better not go in that direction. So,
Right.
yeah. And then the last thing, video, so important to cable to a degree. And we'll see how this all shakes out. But there's another Comcast connection here. So what I think will happen is they're going to adopt the Charter way in terms of in the Cox footprint. I think we'll see Xumo become the go-to device for new video subscribers, just a streaming device, and that comes out of the Comcast Charter streaming joint venture. So, so Comcast will be involved from that standpoint. Now, what's not clear is how this is going to impact the Cox X1 syndication deal that they had with Comcast, which goes back years. So they had kind of adopted their approach with the traditional pay TV product, and they were starting to do the Xumo thing, but only for broadband only customers. And again, another weird thing, weeks ago there was this rumor that Cox was not moving ahead or had not renewed the X1 syndication deal. I never quite got to the bottom of it, but at that time I was like scratching my head going, why would they do that? It's like they have all these customers already on this product. What are they going to flip to something else and do some sort of expensive hard switch? I mean, that's expensive, disruptive. And then this thing came up and I'm like, well, it kind of makes sense now. If they're not going to renew it, maybe, the longer term, they're going to go in this other direction if they're going to go the Charter way. So anyway, that was the kind of the video weirdness.
Yeah.
That kind of came into this. Yeah.
Video weirdness should just be a subsection on our site in general.
I think it should be like an ongoing weekly drop in.
Exactly.
What happened that was weird in video this week? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's turn to what's next. One thing I was wondering is what industry players might object to the deal, if any. And I also want to know, what regulatory risks are on the horizon and what other details you're going to be watching. But just to go back to my first part of that question, do you see Comcast pushing back on this deal at all? And what other hurdles might be on the horizon here?
I would be surprised if Comcast jumped in, but you never know because, never say never, but there was a time, when like AT&T and Comcast were like fighting over Media One years and years and years ago.
Right.
So maybe now that they know that, well, hey, Cox is in the game. I haven't seen anything that says, oh, well, the value of this deal really, the price on this deal really undervalues Cox. I haven't seen anything like that, like going, oh, we'll just wait and see if a bigger bid comes in.
Okay.
It's weird though, like on Comcast, I don't know. It's like the Trump administration kind of doesn't like them.
Right.
Very much. Especially because of NBC's connection. But New Street, Jonathan Chaplin was thinking about this. Like, does this mean there's going to be more M&A in the cable arena? And his suggestion or thought is that Altice USA might be a target.
Yeah, we were talking about that, I feel like 2 years ago or something, that Altice might be up for sale for Comcast, right? So I was wondering about that too. If you've heard anything about that recently, and if this deal impacts that, Yeah,
I haven't heard like anything like specific like in the works. Altice USA is kind of in the midst of a turnaround right now. Under the prior regime, they had their pricing was out of whack. It was too high. They were losing share, a lot of cost cutting. Not taking care of things very well on the customer service side. A lot of other things were ailing. And then Dennis Matthew, who's a former Comcast guy, came in and has kind of reset everything. And I think the question is, are they going to have enough time to really turn everything around on their own and go forward on their own before this big debt wall hits them in a couple of years. And this actually came up. Chris Winfrey was talking on the I think it was Moffett Nathanson's event, and they had asked, or he had said that it was clear that the Altice way, which had to do with the prior regime, not the current one, obviously didn't work. And obviously they're trying to rectify that and fix it. And he was asked, well, can they fix it? And he said, nah, he thought it was too little too late. I'm like, that's an interesting thing to say. And then, the next day, hey, we're buying Charter, or I'm sorry, we're going to merge with Cox. So,
right. Interesting.
Kind of, again, just like huge surprise on that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, okay. Well, sorry. I feel like I diverted you there, but in terms of other
like regulatory stuff,
regulatory hurdles, if any here.
Yeah. But, I think what happens here could relate to any future cable M&A. So, they are related, I think. But, so we'll keep an eye on it. I think in normal times, they wouldn't have to worry too much about antitrust issues because we're not talking about the elimination of a competitor from the market, since there's virtually no overlap between the Cox footprint and the Charter footprint. I mean, of course, there will be somebody is going to oppose. Somebody's going to have an issue here. But I don't. From like when I hear from like Blair Levin with New Street, who without him, I feel like I'm flying blind in the regulatory world. To be honest with you. That I don't see like any like real deal breaker that could be on the horizon. Time will tell. But we did have a scenario when Comcast tried to buy Time Warner Cable years ago, and the concerns were that the combination would stifle video competition. That was the big problem with it. And then Blair, when you hear him kind of think about it today and apply it to Cox Charter, it's not really as much of a relevant issue anymore. I mean, the videos, I think it would be hard to say it's very competitive, I think, with all the virtual MVPDs in there and the other subscription video on demand. I mean, there's a lot of options, and all the traditional pay TV guys, cable included, are losing subscribers hand over fist. So you can't be like, you're stifling competition when they're getting their butts handed to them. Right. So, But then again, these are not normal times, right? So what kind of Trump tax will need to be paid to get this deal done? I mean, we haven't seen anything go through so far that hasn't involved a commitment to reducing diversity and equity and inclusion. So I think, will there be? I mean, I don't know what I haven't looked at what Cox's and Charter's DEI policies look like. But I'm sure if there's any sort of policy at all, they're going to be like, say, we need to just wipe that away or have some sort of a concession. Because you're right. We've seen that with Verizon Frontier, T-Mobile Lumos,
T-Mobile,
maybe some others. I don't know. So we'll see what Trump and Carr have in store for this deal. But DEI would seem the one they'll focus on. I don't know what the broadcasters will think about this.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, we know who to come to keep us updated on what happens next here. It's you, but hopefully Chris Winfrey and everybody else will consult with your calendar before making any other big announcements here. Guys, come on.
Text me next time. Give me a heads up.
Right. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for your great reporting on this and everything else, and for your time today. Looking forward to reading your future stories on this.
All right. Well, thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it.